Good night. It's the 4th of September 2024. A roundup, just a general roundup and a chat. Please understand, I tend to speak a little loud because I know that there are people who look at my channel and need me to speak loud. They can't catch my words. I used to speak like normally like that, and I don't normally shout, but people said we can't hear you, and it's a problem. So I have to up me voice a bit and have a kind of an assertive kind of a voice, which could be mistaken for being a sort of angry, and sometimes I am, but not always. So most of my vocal tone, if I could use that expression, is to make sure that I'm heard. I used to buy an awful lot of English technical books on how to do various things like hardening and tempering steel and repair stuff. And I found they used all these big words, spanning and traverse and all of this thing, and I'd have to look up the words, and I didn't find that they got the point across. And you'd read the same thing twice or three times and you still didn't get it across. And when I finally learned how to do it right myself, I discovered that they weren't strictly right. Didn't strictly have it right. Now, and then I'd read American books written by fellas who would know the subject, and the Americans are far better at explaining stuff than the English, funny enough. And I like to be very explicit, so that when you watch my video or you hear me explaining something, you know that's how it's done, and I have done it, and I usually like to show how it's done in reality, so you know he's doing it there, and so it must be right. Now, there was one time years ago, I was doing an house insurance deal, and a woman rang me up from another insurance company giving me a quote, and I was driving. But what happened was there was roadworks going on my right, and there was big roadworks, and so I was able to talk to her and try and get across what I wanted. And didn't a big lorry pull up on my right, and the engine was ticking over, you know the way they go, blah, 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 blah. And I raised my voice real loud so she'd hear me. And she took it that I was being abusive to her and lectured me on shouting at her and all the rest. It's ridiculous how people cannot differentiate between shouting to be heard, and in the Yorkshire Mills long ago, everyone had to shout. You remember your man Fred was in that programme, was it EastEnders? And he explained that he shouts because that's the only way they could be heard. And on a football pitch, whether it's ladies or gentlemen's football or men's football, the coach has to shout. It's a terror how people don't have the basic comprehension of intelligence to understand the difference between abusive shouting and communication shouting. There is a complete and utter difference. In any event, I got a few queries there about a few things. One is my attitude to Sean Quinn and all of that. Sean Quinn was a major player in rural Ireland, and particularly to the rather depressed economically, not otherwise, area of West Cavan, Fermanagh, Leitrim and that area, and provided a lot of employment. But I have to be honest about it and give my fair account of him. Anyone that gets involved in windmills immediately raises the hackles. I begin to wonder, have they proper comprehension? There is a hidden agenda in the wind industry, and that's quite plain. There are some big businesses who can come in, get planning, give all their hype and guff and about all the millions of homes they're going to power free, and then get planning permission, build the thing, get it built, and flog it off to the ESB, SSE, all paid for by the consumer. But not everyone's in on this. This is a golf club agreement or some kind of a secret deal where they're never left holding the can. Anyone who builds a wind farm always gets a customer. That's the way it's done. How that is done is not quite fully grasped by me. But an example of that was John Lang plc bought the Glencarbury wind farm in County Tipperary, and he couldn't make a profit. Now, if Sean Quinn, if John Lang PLC, a big, honest, ordinary builder of big projects, couldn't make it pay, how does Sean Quinn think he'll make it pay? Has he the secret deal that all the rest of them had? Greencoat Renewables was set up to be the buyer of last resort, and it's selling 4 or 5 windmills it was announced last week. There, none of them making a profit. I also have done a dossier. It's there available. It shows these things can never make money. They're only a scam among the bigger rich and the big elite who have found ways to pawn them off on the unfortunate bill payer. Eddie O'Connor with Mainstream Renewable Energy pulled it off a lot of places. He went over to Chile. They wouldn't give him the sweetheart deal. None of this golf club or secret society stuff was known about to the Brazilians. They just give him a fair price, and the whole thing went bottom up, and it's been sued. Eddie is now dead, it must be said. God be good to him. I'm talking about his company, Mainstream Renewable Power. So anyway, I could go on for a long time about that. So I could. And then the point about it is, about Sean Quinn, I do not have a grievance. And people are saying there, you seem to have it in for him. I don't have it in for him. I do not. I'm neutral on the man. I don't want to wish him any ill or anybody. But the thing about it is, when he was flying high, he started hiring people who are supposed to be great. Oh, they're great. Oh, you want to see the men he got now. Oh, he has people. Oh, the staff. Sure, it's not him at all. Sure, it's the great people he hired. Now, I'm not talking about the people very close to him who are very much in the news. Please understand that. If you don't want to, I can't force you. There were many others that most of the public will not know about, whom I knew very, very well. And I failed to see what was great about them at all. They didn't seem to have anything going for them, other than they were well connected for getting public contracts and getting councils to buy tar and all of that. That was no good. That's not the kind of expertise he really needed. He really needed to pay big money to somebody to mark his card on the world markets in money, the world money markets, to explain contracts for differences, hedge funds, and all of the massive financial management. And I personally would know very little about it either, had I not studied it in my degree course in the Institute of Public Administration in Dublin, about which you notice I have nothing only good to say for the people there. How we can have such an institute, and how we can have some universities still in Ireland that know so much about engineering and everything, and we can't get any of that into government. But we know part of the reason that the Strategic Environmental Assessment Directive, the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive for local projects, is being breached. They haven't got the expertise in government, and they don't want to know. They're being led and said by lobbyists. So I hope you get me train of thought there. The lad Sean Quinn would have wanted was someone who would have flown to New York, did a bit of a feeler around there, what's going on, and we had to do his inquiry right, and maybe pay a few brown envelopes under the counter. It might have been well worth it. They might have told him that as Sean Quinn was buying into Anglo-Irish Bank contracts for differences, there were people who were betting in the exact opposite direction, that it would collapse. And there could only be one winner in such a gamble. Now, do you get me point? That's a huge difference from assuming that I'm something against Sean Quinn. Remember David Drum and what do you call your other fella? Shawnee Fitzpatrick. Both drove down together to Derry Lynn in their Mercedes-Benz car. He gave them tea and cake, and they begged him to stop buying into Anglo-Irish Bank shares. Now, they begged him, and he would not listen. He wasn't going to listen. And that type of belligerence is ridiculous. And now he's thinking of going into windmills again. And that's even more ridiculous. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. Anyway, I've enough said about him. I hope I've made it clear. I'm not out to destroy Sean Quinn or damage him in any way. Best of luck to him. I'm sorry about what happened. But I have to be honest about what happened. I used to wonder, could he go on with this? Could he have this Midas touch? Could it continue? And it always was in the back of my head. At the end of the day, he fell for the wind farm scam. So how can you fall for that? Which is anyone with a primary school education can see, and then go on and handle multi-million euro contracts for differences. Does that make my position clear? I hope it does. Now, moving on to something else, I see people there claiming that their posts have been deleted by YouTube or something else. And I find that sometimes if you press the newest and the latest, you get ones you didn't know were there at all. But I've never managed to get anyone to get a comment to me that was previously deleted. Even over on my Rumble channel, I don't know why that is. The other thing, you get a comment from someone. You're talking about everything. You take on to know everything. You think you know everything. Well, we live in a world where everything is around us. When you turn on the BBC or RTE or CNN News, you get about shipping, you get about accidents, you get about politics, you get it from everything. Why can't I do the same? But then they'll say, you're wrong on every single thing. And yet they will not pick out one issue and say, here's what you said. You said Seoul is in North Korea. It's not, it's in South Korea. Every time I make an error like that, which I didn't in this case, I correct it once someone brings it to my attention. Yet there's people saying, oh, you're totally wrong, and they will not mention one thing. I mean, the Seoul Union is ablaze in the Red Sea. That's a fact. The facts I've given it are true and right. So what is it? How am I to know what is the objection to? Except that I've damaged Sinn Féin big time, and there's a lot of Sinn Féin people get it very hard to accept that. And I'm fighting the traditional parties in a way that I find works for me. It's a devious, it's a cunning way of doing it, but it has to be done in a country where we are being governed by traitors. T-R-A-I-T-E-R-S. Is it traitor? T-R-I-T-O-R-S. Don't hold me on the spelling. I was taught, all my primary schooling was by a Gaelic master from Milford in County Donegal. And so I've always had that wee weakness in my English spelling. I can spell Gaelic writing and Irish writing. And maybe that's a good thing because I am an Irish person. Now, is there anything else we could look at? In the elections in Germany that's just taking place, in France and all over, you have the situation where the party that wins the majority of the vote is kept out by the rest. And then they say it's for democracy. And there is a very strong elitist movement, as you know, left-wing World Economic Forum. I don't know, are all these politicians signed up to it, but it looks to me like Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, certainly Varadkar here, certainly Micheál Martin, and certainly Simon Harris. They're all signed up, either directly coupled or indirectly, through the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, who dictate the shots. And they are led and said by green people who are idiotic. If they were wise, I'd let them at it. You look the mess they have made. Just consider that the United States almost certainly blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, bringing cheap gas from Russia to Germany, and Germany still never raises a hair or complains about it. That'll tell you the subservient, roll over and scratch me belly attitude of the Germans. Kittens is all they are. kittens, and they never were very smart, and I am critical of them, even though there are some great Germans. Some Germans have helped me greatly in my campaign. So you can't generalize. You cannot generalize like that. But you look at it, the farmers' protest took to the streets, and the EU backed down on the farmers, and even the Dutch farmers, they backed down a bit again when they were acting against them. So they're afraid of direct action, but when the ballot box is used, they will not obey the ballot box. And in the American election coming up, I don't know, will Trump win? They'll try to stop him. He could actually win, and if they do, I don't think they'll try to stop him taking power. They'll try to stop him taking power. You could see military staff just being forced to pick one side or the other. They'll have some kind of an indecisive result, and how that'll go, nobody knows. If anyone thinks that Trump didn't respect the ballot box, wait till you see Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and that other Adam Schiff. Don't tell me. There'll be fun there before it's over. So meanwhile, also, they're not very smart either. They could have played the Ukraine a lot better. Now look at the cost of it. Look at the money that's down the drain. And I seen there where oil exports, oil on the open sea, apart now from the Houthi Red Sea, oil demand is going down. Oil demand is going down, and that's indicative of some type of a downturn in the economies. At some stage, it looks to me like the lie that are the company accounts of the world's companies will catch up with them. Essentially, what they're doing is they're keeping their profits good by showing that the assets they own are valued way above what they really are if they went on the open market. That's how collapses happen, when you overvalue the assets. So if you had a farm, and let's say it's worth 100,000, and you make 10,000 a year profit, and next year you make no profit, but the value of the farm goes up 10,000, that's a profit. That is a funny situation with accounts, and I studied accounts for 4 years. I don't know, is that a fair system? I might have to look at that again. There was a book called Bean Counters written on this subject and about fair value adjustments and all of this. So what we have at the moment is we have probably a severe recession going on at the minute in parts of the world, but that it's not noticed because of the cooking of the books. You understand me? That's probably what's happening. In 2008, when the financial collapse happened because of the subprime mortgages, if the governments of the world had to print enough money and just print and print and print, there'd be no recession at all. In fact, if the Irish government had to print enough money and give it to Anglo-Irish Bank, they'd probably have survived. But it would debase the currency. And you only have to look yourself. I must do something to do with my hardware bills and just check. I mean, prices are going to hit. Prices seem to me to be going up about, like what was €100 2 years ago is now about 160, in my honest opinion. Although some things are not gone up that much. The price of petrol and diesel at the pumps does not appear to be that much. It's a bit bigger, a bit more, I remember, but it's not that much more. But some things are hit by inflation, and they're the things that the poor people want. Now, so before I sign off, I made a video about the bike parking place at Leinster House, saying it should be 750 billion they should have charged them. Being sarcastic, of course, but it's indicative of what happens. I mean, somebody in public position signed off on a deal for €336,000 for 14 parking places for bikes. And this is the green agenda gone mad. But I do make the point. Don't make the mistake, folks, of thinking that the people will vote for parties I would favour. They'll vote a bit. And every move will be made to defeat them. And even if the National Party and the Irish Freedom Party got a good few seats, they'll not let them into government. But We have to try. An awful lot will depend on the American election in November. If Trump and Vance win that, then there's going to be crack. There's going to be fun because the United States, although it's on a downward trend, it'll never be as strong as it was again, but it could be brought to a certain level. And I get the distinct impression from the Chinese, the Indians, the South Africans, and the Russians that they would prefer a United States that was going all right. They don't want it so powerful. They don't want the hegemony of the dollar and all of this and controlling the money and controlling sanctions and seizing foreign bondholders' money and all of that. But they prefer to see a fairly solid block of United States there. I don't see the bitterness, and there certainly was not any bitterness towards the United States in about 2016 when Trump got elected. There seemed to be a general get on with the job thing. But but it's changed a good bit. It's changed a good bit. So if Trump gets in, you're likely to see a bit of solution of the world's problems, not to everyone's liking, and you might see a slight improvement. I mean, the lunatics in the EU, the lunatic that's running Britain and all of them, what are they going to do? They're going to get no hearing from him. And in fairness to him, everything he ever said to them was right. He told the Germans, you shouldn't rely so heavily on the Russians for your fuel. It's not a good policy. And they laughed their heads off. And his successor blew up their gas supply, and they're charging them 4 to 5 times the price for gas taken from America to here than they did before. Okay, we'll let you go with that, folks, and I might cover something else again. Hope you enjoyed the video. It's not meant to be too controversial. Goodbye, and comment underneath.